They say there was once a person who was standing on the street corner, right? And they're loafing around. Now, I know in New York, I haven't seen them here in California, but in New York, there are a lot of signs that say, like, no loitering, fines of up till $1,000. There are two people on the side of the road, and they're just loitering, right? They're smoking, they're eating the sunflower seeds, throwing them on the floor, and a patrol car passes by. And the cop stops, and he goes over to them, and he says, hey, what are you guys doing? So they quickly, they put out the cigarette butt and they clean their mouth from all the sunflower seeds. And one guy says, me? I'm doing nothing. So the cop looks at the other guy and says, yeah, well, what about you? He says, me? Oh, I'm just helping him do nothing. I want to today unpack a little bit on what is individualism versus collectivism, specifically in a time of war. Specifically when Am Yisrael and all of us, all around the globe, are experiencing, on the one hand, so much going on in Israel. On the other hand, so many of us from the far are wondering, well, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to contribute? How am I supposed to feel? Am I really a part of it? If I'm living on the other side of the world, what's my obligation? What am I supposed to feel? What am I supposed to do? What am I not supposed to? And I'd like to offer a little bit of perspective on it, straight from the Nevi'im. If I could put a disclaimer, we're going to read some ideas now, which I'm not going into the political side of it. I believe that there will be a time and place to discuss the political side. It's not today. Today, when Am Yisrael is at war with the world, we also don't need to focus on the divisions and the fighting and all the critique, which is necessary and important. Okay, so it's not we're sweeping it under the carpet. Simply, today, we're focusing more on the individual perspective of what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do, versus much more global of politically what does and doesn't make sense. And you'll see in a minute what I'm talking about. Let's look at Navi Yehoshua. Let's start from the beginning. Okay, so you have the first chapter over here. The Jewish people are just going into the land of Israel. So Moshe met, which another time for another conversation, a beautiful transition of power. Moshe Rabbeinu dies, and Yehoshua seamlessly takes over. And if I can, I'd like to read you a little bit of what happens. ויהי אחרי מות משה, עבד אדוני, ויאמר אדוני אל יהושע בן נון משרת משה לאמור. This takes place after Moshe dies. Yehoshua is now going to cross into the land of Canaan, conquer it, and then settle the land. So Moshe Avdi met, right? Moshe, my servant, died. V'ata, and now, kum avor et hayarden, come cross the Jordan River. Ata v'chol ha'am hazeh ha'aretz asher anochi noten lahem livnei Yisrael. Cross over and start conquering the land that I have given to the Jewish people. Kol makom asher tidroch kav raglechem, every place that the bottom of your feet will touch, lachem nitativ, I have given it to you. Kasher dibarti el Moshe, just like I've spoken to Moshe, all the promises I made from Avraham Avinu all the way until the Jewish people are now going into the land of Israel. Everywhere you step, the land belongs to you. Mea midbar v'halevanon. This morning I was thinking, from the river to the sea. It's amazing. They steal everything from us, even our psukim. Yes? Mea midbar, from the desert, v'halevanon, until the Lebanon. ועד הנהר הגדול, from the river, נהר פרת, כל ארץ החיתים, ועד הים הגדול, until the sea. All of this land belongs to you. לא יתייצב איש לפניך, nobody will stand up against you. The Jewish people will be with you. If the psukim sound familiar, it's because in many knis, bate knesset, synagogues, we say this when the Torah comes out. חזק ואמץ, כי אתה תנחיל את העם הזה, את הארץ אשר נשבעתי לאבותם לתת להם. You are the one who is going to inherit the land. So don't be scared. You need to be strong. Don't be afraid. רק חזק ואמץ מאוד לשמור, לעשות ככל התורה אשר ציווך, משה עבדי, אל תסרו ממנו ימין ושמאל. Just make sure that you follow the words of the Torah, the words that Hashem had commanded Moshe. למען תשכיל בכל אשר תלך. Therefore, you're going to be wise. You'll be able to conquer. Everywhere you go, you'll be successful. לא ימוש ספר התורה הזה מפיך. Make sure you take the Torah with you. You're not just fighting for the land, you're fighting for the nation. And the only way to claim the land is by claiming the book with it. Okay, now what happens? So Yehoshua then goes to the nation and he gives them these instructions. I want to jump with you to Pasuk Yud Bet. If you look at the paper, you have the English translation on the bottom. It should be verse 12 as well. Yehoshua now turns to a very specific group of people. In addition to giving them the general instruction, he now has some very specific instructions. Look at Pasuk Yud Bet. Who is he talking to?
The Reuben tribe.
Very good. Reuven. Who else? Gad and?
Half the tribe of Manasseh.
Okay, Yefem Mod. So he's going to speak now to Reuven, Gad, Chatzi Shevet Menashe, half of the tribe of Menashe. If you'll recall, there's a reason these 2.5 tribes are being singled out, and let's see why. V'la Reuveni, v'la Gadi, v'la Chatzi Shevet HaMenashe, Amar Yehoshua Lemor. So after he gave the general instruction to the Jewish people, he now very specifically has something to tell these 2.5 tribes. He says, Zachor et hadavar tziva etchem Moshe eved Adonai Lemor. Remember back in the desert? Remember the conversation you had with Moshe Rabbeinu? Remember what you promised and what he commanded? What happened? Nishechem, he says, let me remind you of the story. Nishechem tapchem umiknechem yeshvu ba'aretz. You already live on the other side of the Jordan River. You've settled. It's your land. Your children, your wives, your children, your cattle, let them stay there. V'atem, but you, ta'avu chamushim. You have to come, not just, you're not, the support team over there cheering in the band. You have to come fortified. You have to come fully dressed in armor. And where do you stand? Lifnei achechem. You're going to the front lines. You're not in the back. You're going to the front lines. Kol giborei hachayil v'azartem otam. Yes, you've already conquered your land. You've already settled. Now it's time for you to fulfill your promise that you told Moshe. You're going to cross with all the Jewish nation. Not only are you going to cross, but you're going to be the frontline soldiers leading us into battle. Till when? Ad asher yaniach Adonai la'achechem kachem v'yirashu gam hema et haaretz asher Adonai Elohechem noten lahem v'shavtem la'eretz yerushatchem v'yirishtem ota. How long are you going to stay with us in battle? Till the end. You're going to stay for the whole kibush, for the whole conquering of the land, which took how many years? How long did it take to conquer the land? Take a lucky guess. What's a lucky number? 7. Very good. You could say it out loud. 7. Yeah, it took 7 years to conquer the land.
They still didn't finish. Sorry.
Yafeh Mod, Rachel.
They didn't finish back then, by the way.
It's true. It's true. And the kibush, the conquering took 7 years. The chiluk, the division of the land took 7. Like Rachel accurately pointed out, unfortunately, we never fully finished the job. Till when are you going to stay? So Yehoshua says, you're going to stay until we conquer the land. And then you could go back to the land you came from, across the Yarden. So what does Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe respond? What do the tribes say? Vayanu et Yehoshua, and they respond to Yehoshua saying, Kol asher tzivitanu naseh. We promise you, everything we told Moshe Rabbeinu back in the day, we will do. Ve'el kol asher tishlachenu neilech, and wherever you send us, it doesn't matter which battle you want us to fight in, which position you need us in, we will be there. Kichol asher shamanu al Moshe, ken nishma elecha. We promise you, just like we listen to Moshe Rabbeinu, we will listen to you. So what happens? The tribes tell Yehoshua, we promise. Everything that we told Moshe Rabbeinu, we promise to fulfill and more. We will follow everything you say, every commandment. We will be there. And they add, not only will we be there during the conquest of the land, we will also stay until everything's settled. Now, what did they promise Moshe? So let's go back into Bamidbar. If you look at source 2, this is the conversation that the tribes have. Umikne Rav, I'm reading on Bamidbar Lamed Bet, the 32nd chapter, Pasuk Aleph. Umikne Rav haya livnei Reuven v'livnei Gad atzum ma'od. ויראו את הארץ, יעזר, ואת ארץ גלעד, והנה המקום מקום מקנה. So what happened? We're talking about a group of very, very wealthy people. It's interesting. We know that in the times of Ezra and Nehemiah, who ended up coming back to Israel? After Koresh said the Jews could come back? Not the wealthy people. Very nice. Only the people who had nothing to lose. The old, the widow, the poor. The rich people, they had houses, They had investments. For them to come and visit and take some pictures and show their support through PayPal, that worked. So over here, this is not a new problem. Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe have a lot of cattle. They look at the land across the Jordan River on the east, and they say, wow, this is an amazing piece of property. We want to settle it. But we have to first go speak to Moshe. So they come together, and they speak with a lot of respect. They come to Moshe, to the Eidah, to the assembly, to the Kohen, and they say, please, we see a really good piece of land. We would love to settle over here. Look at Moshe Rabbeinu's response in Pasuk Vav. Vayomer Moshe. Now you have to understand, this comes on the heels of the Miraglim, the 10 spies. Yes, plus 2, but the 10 spies who spoke Lashon Hara. Vayomer Moshe livnei Gad v'livnei Reuven. He says, Ha'achechem yavo lemilchama v'atem teshvu po? I don't understand what you're asking me. Your brothers are now going into battle. We're going to cross into Israel. They're going to be fighting for their lives. And you want to stay on this side? Like I said, another conversation for another time. V'lama tinyun et lev bnei Israel. If you guys are not going to join, you're going to sow doubt. You're going to lower the morale of the people. What are you going to do? How does this request make any sense to you? It's nice that this piece of property looks good, but by you disconnecting yourself from the group, by you disassociating yourself from the general Jewish public, you're going to destroy the morale of the Jewish people. You're going to create doubt in people's heart. Do we really want this? Is it really a good idea? Look, some of us aren't even going. He says, don't you remember? This is exactly what the spies did. We sent them on a mission. You wanted them to go. They came back, and all the spies did was complain. And immediately after the spies come back, it says the Jewish people started crying. We don't want to go. You're taking us to a land, Eretz Ochelet Yoshveh, a land that eats its people. Who wants to go to such a horrible, right? Give us a leader. We'll go back to Egypt. Let us die. What do you want? You know this history already. The moment there was a small group of dissidents, already the whole morale of the people went down. So Reuven, Gad, and the half tribe of Menashe say, no, we are nothing like the spies. Look at Pasuk. Look at Pasuk Yud Zayin. They say, no. ואנחנו נחלץ חושים לפני בני ישראל עד אשר אם הביאנום אל מקומם. We promise you, we are not trying to break apart from the group. We're not trying to be the cop-outs. We're not trying to be the dissenters over here. To the contrary, we will join the group that's going into Israel. We will not only join them, we will fight with them. We will be there. We will make sure that they are settled. And they say something very interesting. They say, we're going to make sure that our cattle and our children and our women are all settled. Moshe responds to them, okay, if that's the case, first make sure that your women, then your children, then your cattle. Yeah, he's giving them a little musar. He's rebuking them. You're so worried about your finances. First take care of your wives, then of your children, then of your finances. And if that's the case, if you will truly cross over, you will help with a war effort, you will not disassociate from the rest of the community, I give you my blessing. But if that's not what you plan on doing, you can read the psukim on yourself. He has some very harsh words for them. We find something very interesting here, which is both Moshe and Yehoshua, along with the 2.5 tribes, are focusing on something very specific, which is, here's a small group of people that whatever is happening to the majority is not working for them, either by choice or other. And they're saying, so let us do our own thing. And the critique is, well, if you decide to do your own thing, that's very nice. It may be good for you. But how are you going to make sure that what you're doing for you doesn't in any capacity hurt the nation? Doesn't in any shape or form hurt the rest of us? And I want to talk about 2 different models that you have of cultures and what a Jewish model looks like and why it's so harmful when we adopt outside cultures that are foreign to us. So if you can look at the sources, I have something very interesting on page, should be on page 6. Are any of you familiar with Gerard Hendrik Hofstede? I don't actually know how to pronounce his last name. I heard some say Hofstede, They made him French, Hofstede. No. Okay, so let me tell you a little about him. He was actually a Dutch social psychologist who lived from years 1928 to 2020. So we're not talking that long ago. He recently passed. And he worked for many, many years in IBM. When he was doing all his research, he ended up, because he worked in IBM, he recruited 110,000 participants over a span of 40 years. So we're talking about a significant researcher who was trying to understand the different cultures and how it affects the business models, right? We're talking about IBM being an international company. How do different cultures interact with each other, and what does it then do to the success or failure of businesses? Yes, he originally came up with a model of 4 distinct elements and then added 2. I would like to focus in on one of them. If you look at the little bubble over there, and you can zoom in if you're doing it on a screen. If you have it on a hard paper, you can't do this. But if you look at it, you have in the center, it says cultural dimensions theory. And to the right in the green box, it says individualism versus collectivism. So different cultures are obviously very different. That is not something I have to tell you. Yes, we just came back from Mexico City, and I thought I was going with a lot of stuff, but the amount of gifts that we were given, we needed double the amount of suitcases than we came. Yes, you come to Americans' houses, it's a little different. Yeah, everybody has their spaces, their boundaries, their borders. You're lucky if they offer you a glass of water. Different cultures are quite obviously different. So we have individualistic cultures versus collective. And I want to read to you the definition of what they are and how they apply to us. Okay. Individualism. Individualism is a philosophical and social perspective that places importance on the autonomy, rights, and freedoms of the individual. So societies that are individualistic, the human being is at the center. Independence, success on your own, individualism, how well you could do. Yeah, that's all very central to an individualistic culture. It believes that each person possesses inherent value and is entitled to make independent choices and pursue their own goals. It values personal responsibility and recognizes the unique qualities and contributions of each individual to society. If this sounds familiar, it may be because you're living in the United States, okay? In fact, the United States is the symbol of what they call rugged individualism. Individualism to the extreme. Why? We just had Thanksgiving, yes? Remember the Pilgrims? Why did they leave England? What was happening? I'm sure the British on the screen have a different narrative of how history unfolded. But from our perspective, what happened?
Religious persecution.
There was a group, yes, there was a group of Puritans who were being persecuted by the Anglican Church. And they decided it's time for us to run away. Don't think, it wasn't easy. They didn't come here for the opportunity of the land of the gold and the free. It was not because of the discomfort economically that they were leaving. It was purely religious reasons that drove them out. Yes? It's for that reason that you find both in the Articles of Confederation, which is the first document predating the Constitution, and then the Constitution itself, there's a tremendous focus on personal rights. Yes? Why? It's a society that broke away from another place that was very much collective. The bigger goal, the bigger group will impose on the smaller group. So when the United States Constitution was written, in the fabric of the Constitution, it's made to ensure that the individual's rights, the individual's needs are taken care of. Yes? So you have the individual who's at the center of the universe. It's all about them. It's me. It's my goals. It's what I need. There's a very nucleus family. It gives a lot of room for growth, independence, autonomy. The flip side is collectivism. Yeah. Collectivism is a philosophical and social ideology that emphasizes the welfare and interests of the collective group or community over the individual desires. It promotes the idea that individuals should prioritize the needs of the group and work together towards common goals and shared values. Collectivism often values cooperation, collaboration, and interdependence. Notice very, very different. In fact, the model that we see for collectivism today is actually Japan. In Japan, forgive me, I don't know the pronunciation of the word, the wa, which means the group. Yes, there's even a specific word for it, which is a society built around the greater good of the community, the group. The individual matters, but they only matter to the extent they're attached to something bigger, something greater, something more than just me, myself, my pursuit. Now, you could argue that many cultures are a combination of both. Yes? I believe that if you look at the Jewish nation, we definitely have a combination between, for example, the mitzvot ben adam lamakom, which are very individualistic, versus ben adam lachavero, which is very much a collective society. Yes? Depending on where in the spectrum you are, I think every culture has one that's more dominant or the other. Today I want to talk to you about the collectivism. Right? Both Moshe and Yehoshua are very specific in telling the 2.5 tribes, we are concerned that your individual needs will harm the greater group. And unless you can convince us otherwise, this is a very bad idea. Not just for them, not just for the larger group, but also for you. If you break away from the nation because, hey, I have different needs, is it really going to be to your benefit? If you disconnect yourself from the people that you are a part of, is that really good and healthy? And the tribe's response is, you're right. You're right. It's not good for the nation. It's not good for their morale, nor is it good for us to be disconnected. And therefore, we will find some form of collaboration that really we're just going to be a bridge. Kind of like they say America and England, we're the same country, just divided by a common language. Right? We're going to create a long, long bridge. Almost like the CBX tunnel that we went through on Sunday. A long, long bridge, just going to be one place. I want to talk to you about the downside of individualism. Yes, there are benefits, but I want to talk about the downside. If you look at source 4, Elias Canetti, one of my favorite authors, is originally a Sephardic Jew. Born in Bulgaria, makes his way eventually to Germany, wrote many, many books. This particular book is a nonfiction book. I recommend you read it. It is a phenomenal book on sociology, on human nature, on how crowds work, on how power works, the dynamic between governments, a lot of the upheaval that we see today politically, he's already talked about. I want to read to you his first chapter called The Fear of Being Touched. Right? So we've created, specifically in the United States, in other places as well, a very, very individualistic society, a place where we actually pride ourselves. Right? Look at that person. They're a strong, independent human being. That's a compliment, no? Oh, look, they're always needy, dependent. Those aren't compliments, not where we come from. Oh, they always need somebody. They always need people. Wow. Look how amazing they are, all alone. Yeah. Hear the words I'm saying? Alone, independent, don't need other people. Those are things we see as virtues. In fact, we so much see them as virtues that the flip side terrifies us. Let's read together. There's nothing that man fears more than the touch of the unknown. He wants to see what is reaching towards him and to be able to recognize or at least classify it. Chacham Fahor has a whole article on why we hate the other. Phenomenal article, very important to read. But in general, people are terrified of that which they can't see. That's why very, very little kids are often scared of the dark. Yeah, a lot of times you come, they're terrified of the dark. Oh, they see monsters. My father-in-law always says, please find me a monster, put it in a jar if you have it, we could sell it for millions. When was the last time anybody found a monster? It's not really a monster, yes? As soon as you turn on lights, you realize, oh, it's my dirty laundry I never folded. It's the pile of books I never returned. It's all the projects that I started but never finished. There are no monsters. But when it's dark, it's scary. Because for us as human beings, we don't like to touch the unknown. We don't like to not see, not feel, not understand what we're going to be encountering. Man always tends to avoid physical contact with anything strange. Our knee-jerk response to anything we don't know is, don't touch. Yep. In the dark, the fear of an unexpected touch can mount to panic. For those of you who are actually scared of the dark, right? Any move suddenly makes you jump. For those of you who have ever been in the ocean or a lake, you know that feeling, yes? The first time I went here into our beautiful ocean, I couldn't wait to go. So I decided I was running a girls program and we were gonna go snorkeling. One, I didn't realize how salty the ocean is. I think I drank more salt water than I ever needed in my whole entire life. I felt like this was kalpas, but like a million times. If the Jews in Egypt cried, I drank all their tears. That was one. The second thing was, I didn't realize how scared I am of the unknown. So there's a lot of what we call kelp. Yeah, what's kelp? It's seaweed. But when you don't see it, every little piece of kelp feels like a shark that's coming to bite your foot. Suddenly there are more sea lions, and I'm telling polar bears, things that don't even swim in the waters in the Pacific. I felt them on my feet. Why? Because the fear of the unknown is very, very real. The touch of something, even more, right? If someone or something that you don't expect to touch you, touches you, you scream. Rightfully so, you should. Yes? It's a built-in, it's a mechanism to help us survive. Even clothes give insufficient security. It is easy to tear and pierce through to the naked, smooth, defenseless flesh of the victim. Yes? Our clothing isn't sufficient when we're scared of something else, something outside. You see, we've built a society where, and Elias Canay talks about it a few chapters later, where we've all built houses, fortresses, that are very, very far apart. I have to say, I was just in Mexico City. And firstly, we're going to talk in a minute about Mexico City and communities and the incredible side of an inclusive community, what it looks like to live in a collective community. But before I get there, something very interesting. Everywhere we went in Mexico City, there were beautiful houses, but you would never know because outside of the houses, there were huge fortresses. I'm talking about huge walls, and on top of the walls, there's barbed wire, and on top of them, there are spikes, and on top of those, there are security cameras and sometimes dogs. Yes? Why? I understand. We build these kind of institutions to make sure nobody ever comes close, right? In some places that we live, we have to build bigger walls, in some places, smaller walls. But we've developed a concept as individuals, the best way to live is if I have triple locks. If I have a Ring camera on the outside that scares everybody away before I even let them into the house, right? I make sure nobody comes close. When I walk on the street, it's a little more scary because I don't walk around with a fortress. So there are other ways that we segregate ourselves. Make sure not to have eye contact. Yeah. One of the most awkward moments I had was we traveled to New York for a wedding with my little Yair. He was 7 months old, and he was just learning how to really make eye contact with people. We got onto the train. We were going from the airport to pick up our car. And for whatever reason, Yair decided to stare somebody down. Now, you have to understand, the first 3 seconds was really cute. The guy smiled back at him. He waved. Yair was not smiling. All he was doing was staring the person down. And it started to get really awkward. About 10 minutes after that, finally, we parted ways, only to go down into the car rental. The couple came to the exact same counter as us to get a car. And what does Yair do? Stares them down all over again, right? We're not comfortable with that. Did you just lose audio? No, okay. We don't like to connect. We've been taught, just avoid contact. Don't look at them. Don't look at the person's face. If you look too long, it feels weird. Certainly don't sit near them, right? You're sitting on a bus, on a train. Make sure that you leave at least 2 seats. Try this. Try sitting in the middle of 2 people. Look at the faces that you're going to get. Or they'll just probably pick themselves up and move, right? It feels too awkward. You're not sitting on that person's lap. I hope not, right? You're simply sitting in the middle of 2 people. If you've ever sat on an airplane, the middle seat is the worst because both people on the sides think that the armrests are for them. So you end up like this the whole flight. Why? Because we don't dare touch each other, not just physically, but we've created a culture where the 2 entities should never meet. It's too scary. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what kind of fusion may take place, what kind of human interaction may happen, and it might leave me very vulnerable. I want to continue reading the 2nd paragraph. All the distances which men create round themselves are dictated by this fear. They shut themselves in houses which no one may enter, and only there feel some measure of security. The fear of burglars is not the only fear of being robbed, but also the fear of a sudden and unexpected clutch out of the darkness. Suddenly you're bumping into something that may leave you vulnerable. The repugnance to being touched remains with us when we go out among people. The way we move in a busy street, in restaurants, trains, or buses is governed by it. Now again, you'll notice different cultures, depending on if they are individualistic societies versus collective, will have a very different interaction. Yes? So for example, if you live in the United States and somebody's coming directly towards you, what do you normally do? What's the normal gesture? You're walking down the street, somebody's coming towards you.
Step aside.
There you move over to the. In fact, sometimes you have this awkward dance because you both move to the right, then you both move to the left. Now you're stuck, and this is weird. If you're in Israel or in Mexico, yes, or somewhere else in the Middle East, and somebody's coming towards you, what do? Nothing. You walk straight into them. Okay, that's the way it works. In fact, if you try to move, you're the weird one. What's wrong with you? Yes. Why shouldn't you touch somebody? I once saw this small clip of they videoed how many times people from different cultures touched each other during a business meeting. Yeah. So for example, the Americans, they shook hands at the beginning, they shook hands at the end. The French came out the ones who touched each other the most the entire meeting. Tapping, hugging, kissing, it didn't matter. Yeah. And then there were variants in between. But the individualistic society teaches us, stay in your own fortress. Build a wall. Don't connect. In fact, not only don't connect, but when somebody reaches out, be terrified. Panic. Run. Be scared. What's in it for them? I remember the first time I went into a coffee shop in California. So I'm from New York. Yes? The first time I came here, and I just wanted to order a coffee. I walk in, and the guy behind the counter says, "Good morning, sunshine. How are you today?" And my immediate reaction to him is, oh my gosh, what does this person want from me? And my husband was laughing. I said, I just came here to order a cup of coffee. We don't know each other. What's all this? He said, it's called just being kind. It's called not being New York. Why? In New York, I had to recently call one of the stores in Brooklyn to order something for the kids. A little Hasidic store in Borough Park that I grew. The guy answers his phone, yeah. Not hello, yeah. And my husband's already feeling offended. I said, but he's talking to me. Don't be offended. What do you want? Okay. Bye. That was the end. Now, the person was really nice. He helped me get exactly what I want. He made me get it shipped. He even gave me a discount. And my husband was appalled. What kind of customer service is it? What kind of person is it? I said, I don't think you understand. It's a different culture. Yeah, this is a very individualistic culture versus a much more collective. I care about the other. I want the other. It's not so much about me. The problem is we've created a world where people are afraid to connect. We've created a world where we glorify those who know how to live alone, how to be alone, how to take care of themselves alone. And we pay a price for it. We pay a really, really high price. And I want to share with you what that price is. If you look at source 5, this is from a book that I really enjoy reading. I think you would too. It's a very short book, actually. It's called Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. You can get a PDF of it. I think it cost me like $5 on Amazon. It was written by the U.S. Surgeon General. His name is Dr. Vivek Murthy. To note, he's the first Surgeon General of Indian descent, which is a big deal in the United States. There are different glass walls and ceilings that slowly get broken. He had his own struggles growing up as a child, both living in India, then moving states, and really never fitting in, not understanding. Just because you speak the language doesn't mean you understand the culture at all. Yes? For example, I'm looking at you, Galia. I heard Galia on the phone. She kept on saying, bueno. Whenever she answered the phone, she said, hi. And I thought that was really cool. because I could speak Spanish too. So when I came Saturday night to the meeting, I kept telling everyone, bueno. The problem is I clearly don't speak Spanish, because that's a greeting you say on the phone, but it's not something you say in person. You sound really stupid. You understand? Just because you speak the language doesn't mean you understand the culture at all. So he came from this perspective where he never really fit in. He always was alone. And he went on a tour through the United States, including during COVID, to figure out what are the biggest plagues and epidemics, right? He's the Surgeon General. That's his job, to take care of the general health public. And he found something fascinating I want to share with you. Look at source 5. He said on his whole tour, he spoke to people in the Midwest, on the 2 coasts, the North, the South. What came up? People may lack social connection in a variety of ways, though it is often illustrated in scientific research by measuring, so he differentiates between loneliness and social isolation. Social isolation and loneliness are related, but they are not the same. Social isolation is objectively having few social relationships, social roles, group memberships, and infrequent social interactions. So this is practically a person, you ask them, can you show me your contacts? They have 3. 2 of them they hate, and the other one they don't know who it is even. Yes, it's the telemarketer that keeps calling them. On the other hand, loneliness is a subjective internal state. Right? I feel alone in a crowd. That's a feeling. You could be surrounded by millions of people, but the feeling of I'm alone is a very subjective feeling. Look at the second paragraph. The lack of social connection poses a significant risk for individual health and, let me find my next page. Here we go.
Page 7, longevity.
Longevity, yes? Now these are some statistics I want you to hear. Loneliness and social isolation increase the risk for premature death by 26 and 29% respectively. Meaning, people who are alone die younger. Not because they had a heart condition, not because they were diabetic, not because they didn't eat the right foods, simply because they were lacking human connection. More broadly, lacking social connection can increase the risk for premature death as much as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. So if you ever buy a pack of cigarettes, you'll see the Surgeon General, right? It warns you in huge letters, warning, this may kill you, this may cause cancer. Now, it doesn't mean if you have friends, now you could start smoking, okay? But what the statistics tells you is that not having interactions, human social interactions, is as deadly as somebody who smokes 15 cigarettes a day. In addition, poor or insufficient social connection is associated with the increased risks of disease, including a 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. Furthermore, it is associated with the increased risk for anxiety, depression, and dementia. Additionally, the lack of social connection may increase susceptibility to viruses and respiratory illnesses. These numbers are crazy. Understand? We're talking about a world with billions of people, and yet we have enough people who are suffering so much that we have statistics about them. Yes? So much so that it's not, today I don't have a friend, what's the big deal? I'll just get onto TikTok and watch a few more videos. Yes? It's, I'm so severely lacking in relationships, I'm so alone, I'm so isolated, that my health, my physical health is being affected. In fact, there's a doctor, he became quite popular, Dr. Sarno, who talks about back pain. When he wrote his book, I think it was in the 70s, it was 1 in 4. Today, I don't know what the numbers are, but 1 in 4 people in the United States every single day would call out sick from work because of back pain. And he has a whole theory of how our mental and emotional health are much more vague. They're much harder to pinpoint, they're much harder to deal with. And more often than not, instead of dealing with our emotional and psychological struggles, we turn it into some kind of physical suffering, so much so that it manifests itself into real life problems. And we see that over here. We're talking about, again, a society that is built on individualism. The lack of social connection can have significant economic costs. Okay, and then they talk about, so how much does it cost to take care of the people? right? What is the price we pay economically by having a whole world of lonely people? And you can read this on your own. The economic price, the social price. We're talking about crazy numbers. Yeah. We're talking about crazy numbers. And I think if we go back to a model, okay? Chevra, I know we think that we're American and we're Mexican and we're British. I hate to break it to you, the Jews are Middle Eastern. As such, our culture, not just our religion, our culture is Middle Eastern. When Moshe Rabbeinu and Yehoshua are talking to the Jewish people, specifically to the 2.5 tribes, they're highlighting a problem that is very prevalent, which is you're individuals, you have needs. That's good. Our society has a place for it. But both you and the greater society are going to suffer tremendously if you disconnect yourself. It's going to be very, very bad. So unless you have a solution on how to stay together, on how to stay apart, not apart separate, a part of the group, this is not going to work. I want to look at some of the solutions if you'll entertain me. I brought you 2 sources from kids' books. I have to say, I happen to think that kids' books contain a lot of brilliance. You see, in the world of academia, we have a problem. We like to sound smart. Because if I sound smart and you don't understand anything I said, it means I'm smart, right? To the contrary, when you read kids' books, when things are simple, when things are clear, when they make sense. When I was publishing one of my articles, the co-author said to me, we need to make this article readable to the general age of 7th graders. I said, yeah, but we're targeting an adult audience. He said, no. When you're writing for the general public, assume that the average age of readership, not those who are reading it, but the intellect, even the adults, the language that's being used, needs to be on a 7th grade level. So I want to read to you one little poem and something from Dr. Seuss. But first, Winnie the Pooh. So for those of you familiar, Winnie the Pooh was actually authored in England by somebody named A.A. Milne. When I was young, I did not like reading Winnie the Pooh at all. I felt that there were too many paragraphs, too many words. Like I said, as an adult, revisiting it, one of the famous actors in the United States was Woody Allen, right? Woody Allen said that 80% of success is just showing up. We're talking about a world where, and many of us today, you don't hear me? You do. Many of us work remotely, right? Post-COVID, some people don't even have offices. Everything's just virtual. It doesn't help, right? It doesn't help that some people, they stay in their pajamas all day, all night. They never have to get out of their houses. Today with Instacart, with Amazon, you literally never have to leave your fortress. And yet that just reinforces.
Somebody's profile isn't muted.
I just muted them. Thank you.
Marlene's profile is not muted.
Yeah. If I can ask those of you who are not muted, please mute yourself. That way we do not, we don't hear the background. Yes?
I just unmuted this very minute just to say that I thought that I couldn't hear you.
Marlene, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, it was
awesome.
just like a minute.
No, it was Marlene. It wasn't you. It was somebody else. Don't worry. I got them muted. For those of you who don't know Marlene is the reason that, let's put it this way. Marlene knows Shiviti before I knew it. So thank you, Marlene. Yeah, so I want to read to you a poem from Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, we talk about isolation, feeling alone, a society that's built on every man's on their own. Look over here for a minute at this poem. Today was a difficult day, said Pooh. There was a pause. Do you want to talk about it? Asked Piglet. No, said Pooh after a bit. No, I don't think I do. That's okay, said Piglet, and he came and sat beside his friend. What are you doing? Asked Pooh. Nothing really, said Piglet. Only I know what difficult days are like. I quite often don't feel like talking about it on my difficult days either. But goodness, continued Piglet, difficult days are so much easier when you know you've got someone there for you. And I'll always be here for you, Pooh. And as Pooh sat there, working through in his head his difficult day, while the solid, reliable Piglet sat next to him quietly, swinging his little legs, he thought that his best friend had never been more right. You know, a lot of times, we're very solution-oriented people. Anybody tells you they have a problem, you have a solution for them, right? Oh, I don't have enough money. Okay, go work. Oh, I really had a bad day with my mother. Well, pick up the... One of the hardest things of having a bad day is somebody else making it worse by giving all the good ideas. Usually you don't need ideas, okay? In fact, you could give the ideas. Most people just need another human being to be there. If I needed you to talk, I would have asked that. And sometimes we think, okay, so we have now a problem with isolation and loneliness. Let's make new projects and let's send out WhatsApp messages. I had a supervisor, God bless her soul, every day would send us 32 new initiatives. It doesn't help, the next day she would cancel all of them. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, how about we just stick to one? Before we run to figure out so many solutions, why don't we just stop and listen? So often, especially in a group, you find that people are never listening as much as they're waiting for their turn to speak. Yeah? They're muted, but at the tip of their tongue, they have something to add. They weren't listening. Ask them, what did the other person say? I have no idea. The ability to sit with another person's problem without needing to fix it, without being uncomfortable enough to just absorb it, to be there, it's a huge gift. It's a gift that many people don't know how to give, and so many of us need. It's why I know therapists will forever be employed. Yeah? So many times, what do? I'm not a magician. I'm paid to listen. The person very often, let's be honest, you've been living with yourself forever. I only met you 5 minutes ago. Do you think I really know you better than you know yourself? There's not a chance in the world. The ability to sit with another person and let them live stream their thoughts without being critical, without needing to come up with a solution, without making things better, because sometimes you really can't make things better. But the ability to just say, wow. You know, in Hebrew we say, tzarat rabim, chatzi nechama. Right? Sometimes when we know we're all suffering together, it feels better. I know that I keep telling my husband, throughout this whole ugly, ugly war, it feels so good to be on our side. You know that? It must be horrible to be from the other side. I would hate to be them. We are so lucky to be part of Am Yisrael. Every time I open my WhatsApp, every time I open any social media, I'm like, wow. It feels so good to know that we're on the same team, even if we've never communicated with each other. I had somebody ask me how my family is doing. And my response to them was, I'm sure the same that you give. So you mean all 7 million of us? No, how's your immediate family? I said, no, they're all my immediate family. She thought I was crazy because she's a regular American who lives in a very individualistic society and has no understanding why the people who live across the globe have anything to do with me. I couldn't explain it to her. That's the truth. I couldn't explain it to her. I can't explain to her why when I see posters and my heart cries, but they're not, who cares? You don't know them. You never met them. No, but they're my people. Wait, are you family? The answer is yes, because Am Yisrael operates as a collective nation. Sure, is there room for individualism? Absolutely. But we as a nation are one. We as a group are one. Yeah, do we come in many different colors and stripes? And yes. Do we sometimes, like idiots, get stuck on those differences? Yes. But guess what? You know who else doesn't get stuck on it? The rest of the world. When the rest of the world bumps into us, they don't think, oh, look at this Polish Jew. Look at this American Jew. Look at this English Jew. Look at this Mexican Jew. Look at this Jew. You know what they think of us? Jews. That's all. Whichever country, I believe it was Chacham Uziel who said, despite the countries we came from, not because of the countries we come from. Am Yisrael is one. We are a nation of collective individuals that, yes, molds itself together. And it's something we've actually been seeing incredibly. I want to show you a minute. So what about the individual? right? What part do I play? In the end of the day, we are part of a nation. And just showing up, that's part of it. Sometimes just knowing, I read a little excerpt from one of the soldiers in Gaza who said, thank you to all the little kids who are sending all these beautiful pictures and drawings and just showing up, right? Practically the fourth grader can't do anything to help win the war. But the ability to say, I'm there, I'm part of Am Yisrael, that already boosts the morale. That already makes the person who's sitting in a tank in Gaza know there's somebody sitting in a little state, in a little school, scribbling pictures because we're part of the same people. I want to look for a second at Dr. Seuss with you. And if you look at that excerpt, it's a book called Horton Hears a Who. Yes? For those of you not familiar, Dr. Seuss is actually from California. In fact, growing up, I always read his books, and I never understood why he drew the trees the way he does. Now, I now know two reasons. Probably he was high on something. Okay, that's one. The second reason is the more probable reason. If you ever go to La Jolla Cove, La Jolla Shores, you see these very interesting palm trees. Yeah? Leon, I'm looking at you. I'm sure you've been there forever and ever. You know the palm trees? They're like beer. Till the bottom, they have these like little tufts. And then when you look at Dr. Seuss's drawings, despite him probably being high on something, he was actually onto something. That's what the trees look like. Yeah? So here's a book about an elephant who finds a little flower, a clover leaf, and on it, he thinks he hears an entire community. The problem is he cannot convince the jungle that there's anybody there to save, let alone that there's anybody there. And they are making his life hell. They want to take this clover leaf, they throw it into a field, and he has to go through millions of clover leaves to find it again. They're going to boil it in hazelnut oil unless he can convince them that there's a community out there. Yes, I told you, there's a lot of brilliance in this that has nothing to do with clover leaves. But what happens? He keeps telling this little community, you got to make noise. You need to let the world know you exist, because if the world doesn't know you exist, they're going to destroy you. So here the mayor in this tiny little, and if I can show you the image. Let's see if I can show you the picture. Here. So this is where, let me see if I can find, this, right here. This is where he thinks he sees a whole community. Yeah, on the top of a tiny leaf. So if you will indulge me, look at source 7. If you go down to, okay, through the town rushed the mayor from the east to the west, but everyone seemed to be doing his best. Everybody seemed to be yapping or yipping. Everybody seemed to be beeping or bipping, but it wasn't enough. All this ruckus and roar, he had to find someone to help him make more. He raced through each building. He searched floor by floor. And just as he felt he was getting nowhere, and almost about to give up in despair, he suddenly burst through the door, and that mayor discovered one shirker, quite hidden away in the Fairfax apartments, apartment 12J, a very small shirker named Jojo, who was standing. He was just standing and bouncing a yo-yo, not making a sound, not a yip, not a chirp. And the mayor rushed inside, and he grabbed that young twerp, and he climbed with the lad up the Eiffelberg Tower. This, cried the mayor, is our town's darkest hour. The time for all the who've had blood that is red to come to the aid of their country, he said. We've got to make noise in greater amounts. So open your mouth, lad, for every voice counts. Thus he spoke as he climbed. When he got to the top, the lad cleared his throat and he shouted, Yap! And that yap, that one small extra yap, put it over. Finally, at last, from that speck on that clover, their voices were heard. They rang out clear and clean. And the elephant smiled. Do you see what I mean? They proved they are persons, no matter how small. And their whole world was saved by the smallest of them all. And as funny as the story is, I think it describes a lot of how we feel. We're living in a world where Am Yisrael is not even a percentage And we are being called to task wherever we're sitting and saying, hold on, you're not an individual. Contrary to what the cultures around us have taught us, we don't operate as individuals. We are a collective nation. Yes, it's a nation that has room for individuality. Yes, there's room for people to express themselves. But we are a nation of collective human beings. And the same thing that both Moshe Rabbeinu and Yehoshua told the 2.5 tribes is the same thing we have to tell ourselves. Atem te'etzu lamilchama. You're going out, achechem. Now who's going out? Our brothers, our sisters, our family. I'm looking around the screen and I know personally cousins, friends, brothers, sisters, neighbors who are out to battle. And I think a lot of us are feeling this feeling, okay, so what am I doing? Right? What can I do? Practically. And I think it's an important question to ask ourselves, which is, for some of us, it means showing up. And showing up can be in many different ways. You have a friend who's in Israel who needs somebody to talk to, so pick up the phone. Right? You haven't spoken to somebody, but you see that they need some chizuk, they need a little bit of encouragement, send them the message. Don't be shy. Doesn't matter that you didn't speak to them for 12 years and you ignored their last 13 messages. Doesn't matter. Now's the time to say, I understand collectively, Am Yisrael is not just in danger. We're struggling for our lives, for a fight of good against evil. I'm not going to stand here quietly. I'm going to figure out on a personal level, what does it mean for me to show up? What does it mean for my voice to be heard? And I can't tell you what that looks like. You know why? Because the way you show up and the way I show up, you see, we always think that equality is very important. Uniformity is very important. That's nonsense. We're not all good at the same thing, okay? We're not all going to fill the same void. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, I am part of Am Yisrael. I am part of the Jewish people. And when I'm sitting in my house, when I'm sitting in my room, and I know many of us already are sitting with this question of, so what can I do? I don't have a good answer for you. I think, though, it's an important question to ask yourself, which is, what do I do? What do I do for Am Yisrael? One day, God willing, when things settle, we're going to be able to ask the much bigger question of, okay, so what do I do with a world that's so lonely, with a world that's so fragmented, with a world that's so broken? It's a good question, okay? It's an important question, and it's not a question we're going to neglect. It's simply for the here and now, we have a much more immediate need. And I want to end off with Rav Soloveitchik, who, in his article, The Community, encapsulates what I think is the struggle of this duality. I live my own life. I can't put everything on hold. I still need to maintain some sense of individuality and independence, and yet I also really want to be a part. He says, the greatness of man manifests itself in his inner contradiction, in his dialectical nature, in his being single and unrelated to anyone. For those of you unfamiliar, he's referring to his whole thesis on Adam 1 and Adam 2, right? On the one hand, the human being is very alone. It's just you and Hashem. As well as in his being thou, right? Related and belonging to a community structure. And I'm asking all of us, we're looking at a world that is really fragmented. A world that really is struggling to understand its own identity. And I believe that we have the key. This is not something new. This idea of, well, how do I maintain my individuality while still being a part of the group? This is not new. Not just is it not new, but it's exceptionally relevant to us today. Today, when we talk about Am Yisrael going through the most horrible in every front. So it's not just in Israel, but those of us who are on college campuses, those of us who are involved in the outside world, we have to stop for a minute and say, I'm part of a collective nation. And what the individualism has done to the world clearly has not been successful. The fragmentation of, I don't care what happens in your backyard as long as it doesn't come to my backyard, clearly hasn't worked. On a very personal level, it hasn't worked, nor has it worked globally. Yes? On a personal level, people are alone, they're sad, they're lonely, they're depressed, they're dying from their isolation. On a global level, this fragmentation of, it's not in my backyard, I don't care, something very dangerous. And I believe for us, the question really is, okay, so how do I readapt to the values that are Jewish? To a world where, yes, the 2.5 tribe, they get to live on their own. but never without forgetting that they're part of a nation. And I'm throwing that question out there of, I don't have a good answer what you could do. But at the very least, stick with the question. Bezrat Hashem, I hope that in the coming weeks we're going to explore, we're going to think, we're going to hash things out, and we're really going to be able to make the world, Chanukah is coming. And Rav Kook says that there's a light in the world, right? Fire can burn the whole world out. If you don't believe it, just go visit the burn unit. It's one of the hardest units in the hospital to see because the people there, even when they're taking morphine and the pain is still so unbearable. And yet fire is something so beautiful. Yesterday it was very cold in San Diego. Freezing winter. It was only 67 degrees at night. So what do? I put on the fire. Yes? And it got nice and warm and toasty in the house. Rav Kook says that the Jewish people, we have to take our fire. We have to take the ugly fire from the world and use it to light up the world. And I'm blessing all of us. We're coming now to Chanukah. The world needs all the light it can get. And we should look inside and see, what do we have to offer? What light do we have? Even if we feel that it was dimmed, what light do we have to offer on an individual level, on a national level? And God willing, one day we're going to get to a global level. Until then, I want to thank you. Thank you for learning with me.